The best part of cooking is when the condiment is being added. This is exactly what finishing is in the building. Welcome back to my channel once again. Today we'll be discussing wall finishing. Wall finishing involves the materials and the processes that require in making sure that the wall is ready and add values and beauty to the building. Before you take further steps on the type of material for your wall finishing, which could either be a wet or dry, you need to consider some salient factors, which include one, the locations, which this is very critical for you to decide the location of the property or the locations of such material being required in the building. Instances maybe in the toilet, in the living room, in the rooms or any other part, or the exteriors of the building. Then two, you also have to consider the moisture level. What are the moisture level in that particular environment, or also the moisture level in that particular building? Instances on the kitchen area or in the toilet areas. It's also critical for you to consider the moisture levels. Another factors, the third factor that you also need to consider is the aesthetic goal. What is the aesthetic goal you want to achieve? What do you want to achieve? How do you want the interior or the exteriors of the building to look like? This is very critical. So you also need to consider in the area, in the locality where the building is being situated, what kind of finishing are being popular in that particular environment. So you need to consider this very carefully. The fourth factors you also need to consider is your budget. What is your budget for these particular finishings? So if you have a luxurious taste and you have a very low budget, that means that the decisions is dead on arrival, as every finishings is being attached with a cost. So budget play a very and a vital role in the selection of materials and also the processes involved for your wall finishing. The last but not the least is the maintenance. How often do you intend to start maintaining this building? What is your maintenance culture? We all know that if you are using painting for a building that is being painted, require within 3 to 5 years, you need to repaint. Imagine if the cost of painting this year is maybe 5 million. By the time you add inflations to in the next 3 years to 5 years that you want to repaint such a building, the cost might have gone up to 8 million, possible 10 million, depending on the percentage of inflation at that time. So we've talked about these 5 factors that you can consider before you decide on the type of finishing you are going to adopt for your wall finishing. After considering these factors, the next thing you are going to consider is whether you are using a wet finishings or a dry finishing. Wet finishing, these are the processes of your plastering. After your plastering, your scrading to your painting. While for a dry finishing, these are your cladding, your wall paneling. So these two processes, we give different shades of finishings. They are all finishing for your walls. If you are considering to go into the finishing, it's critical for you to decide on one, you have to inspect the building. Does the building align? You check the alignment of that particular building. So that will tell you how, because your wall finishing is the last thing that you need to do to give the building a perfect and a very precise look. So If, for instance, you have a wall that is not aligned, that means you have to use your plastering or your rendering. Your plastering for your internal, while you're rendering for the external of your building. So the box of work will now rely on using the plastering or the rendering to correct the misaligned wall. So what your workman will now need to do is to take a gauge of the wall. So you use that to know what the thickness of the wall will be. So after checking the alignment of the wall, the next thing you are going to consider is your services. Your services are your plumbing works and your electrical works and your HVAC, air conditioning, and so on. So you have to check with your electrical engineers, your mechanical engineers, and your HVAC contractor if they are done with whatever they are doing. If you go ahead to do your plastering, and after your plastering the electrician came to site and they want to start breaking the wall all over again to lay their pipes, or the plumbers started breaking the walls to lay their pipes, you realize that you start having patches in your wall rather than having that total finishing. So you start having chases, that the electricians and the mechanicals engineers have created in the wall. So that will not be give a smooth surface for the wall, even though they will have to patch it, but that patch will be quite different from the entire work. So it's critical for you to first you check the alignment of the wall. After that, you check with your HVAC contractors, your electrical contractors, and your mechanical contractors if they are done, and you ensure that you certify that work that has been completed. The last but not the least is for you to check the materials. Materials in many parts of Nigeria, for instances, we have different materials available, most especially for plastering. It's quite challenging down west, sourcing for plastering materials. In most cases, there are some material that will be supplied to site. It will look more like a sharp sand, but you have no option because that is what's available. You need to use it. At the end of the day, you start experiencing cracks after the plasterings of the wall. So it's important for you to have a quality controls for materials that you want to use for your plastering. You need to check that this material will actually meet the qualities of what you want to do. So this three process is very, very critical, and it should not be skipped if you want to have a very good wall finishings. So after all of this, the next thing you are going to do is whichever of these method of either a dry finishing or a wet finishing that you are adopting, you need to now source for the material for both processes and ensure that you engage a very technical know-how persons to handle all of this process, because finishings is the last opportunity that you have to make the wall a perfect and a very beautiful place to be. Wall finishing actually is the final stage of wall construction. So I hope you learned something today. In your next project, when you are in the finishing stage, know critically that you need to pay attention to the type of material. You need to check with your electrical and engineering contractor if they are done with their plastic, with their pipings, and you also need to also check if the wall truly align. Then you also need to hire a very experienced person to handle your plastering. I'll see you on the next one.